Ingles.fm, Real English Conversations, Series 2, Podcast 7, Environmentalism, Medio Ambiente y Ecologismo. Este podcast contiene una conversación real y sin guión entre dos hablantes nativos de inglés, Mark y Tom. Oirás primero la conversación y a continuación una clase de inglés con explicaciones en español. Cada podcast viene con un workbook detallado que puedes descargar desde nuestra página web ingles.fm. Incluye una transcripción completa de la conversación, listas de vocabulario, notas culturales y la clase. Recuerda que los miembros de nuestra lista de distribución reciben gratis transcripciones extra de nuestros podcasts, además de muchas otras cosas gratis. Así que no olvides apuntarte al consultar la página. ¡Buena suerte!
Hi, I'm Tom, and I'm sitting on Bogatel Beach with Mark again. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Tom.
What are we going to talk about today?
Environmentalism, or aka the Green Movement.
Exactly. Now, environmentalism is a broad philosophy and social movement regarding concerns for environmental conservation and improvement of the state of the environment in order to protect it from damage by human activities. And what's someone who speaks out about environmental issues called?
An activist.
Or an environmentalist. And interestingly, mentalist has a slang connotation. What's a mentalist?
Someone who's insane or crazy.
Exactly, but they're not insane or crazy. But anyway, let's move on. Can we talk about the history of environmental awareness? When did it begin? When did people first become concerned about environmental issues?
It's actually been going on in various forms for thousands of years, but the first recognized environmental movement came from Arabic medical texts around the 8th to 13th century in what was known as the Arab Agricultural Revolution.
Yeah, and this is when issues like air contamination and water contamination and soil contamination first came about, wasn't it? Because they were a heavily agricultural society.
Yeah, they could see the negative effects of poor water quality on crops, livestock.
Yeah, and also solid waste, which I thought actually meant human waste, but it means domestic waste. And they became concerned with removing solid waste from the communities and processing it in an environmentally sound way. And then in England in 1272, King Edward I banned coal burning in London because he said it caused horrible smoke problems, and yeah, I can't remember, there was a quote where he said it was sort of disgusting for the human being.
Yeah, so it's the first noted environmental initiative, I suppose you could call it, recorded for England.
Yeah, and then the Industrial Revolution, which began in the UK, well in England, in the 18th and 19th century, was when the big modern day environmental problems began, wasn't it? And why was that?
Well, a massive increase in output of smoke and other pollutants, carbon dioxide, although they maybe didn't understand the impact then.
Well, what were they burning in the factories at that point?
Coal.
Yeah.
So fossil fuels.
And then in Victorian England, which went up to about 1900, there was several early back to nature movements that arose, and they were groups like the RSPB, which is the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, in 1889, and the National Trust in 1895, and there was something before that, wasn't there? There was a couple more laws that came out.
Yeah, in 1863 there was the British Alkali Act, which is a law that was passed by Parliament to basically reduce certain elements of pollution.
Okay, and in the 20th century, what are two of the main environmental groups, the best known ones?
Well, for me, I'd say Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth.
Yeah, and do you know when they originated?
Greenpeace originated in Canada in 1970-71, and they were originally protesting against underground American nuclear tests, because they were very concerned that the effect of the nuclear tests could cause earthquakes or a tsunami. So because of the tsunami worry, their first major campaign was called Don't Make a Wave.
I didn't know that.
Connected it to the tsunami, but Needless to say, the protest didn't achieve its aims, and it didn't stop the nuclear tests.
And that was Greenpeace, not Friends of the Earth.
Greenpeace.
And Friends of the Earth originated in 1969, a couple of years earlier. And a movement that I found particularly interesting is one called the Chipko movement. And this was a movement predominantly by women in the early 1970s in India. And they were inspired by Gandhi, and they started hugging trees.
Literally.
Yeah, and hence the term tree huggers came into our vocabulary. And these women basically were just hugging these great big old trees in India to protect them from property developers that were coming in. And it was a non-violent movement, so it was the first kind of non-violent protest initiative, I guess.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So global warming, what is global warming?
It's a general increase in the surface temperature of the Earth.
Yeah, and it's been measurable since the sort of mid-20th century, and it's also the projected continuation of that warming.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the primary cause of global warming?
Like burning fossil fuels, so like oil, coal, and deforestation plays a massive part also, because it prevents the absorption of carbon dioxide, which is the principal gas responsible.
And what are those gases called?
Greenhouse gases.
Exactly. And where is the worst deforestation in the world, do you think?
I'd probably guess at Brazil, somewhere in the Amazon basin. There's been huge publicity recently going on about the amount of trees that have been felled in the Amazon.
Yeah, between 1991 and 2000, an area 6 times the size of Portugal has been cut down in, this is generally the Amazon region, so not just Brazil, and it's mainly for cattle farming, but also for soybean production, because people are using a lot more soybeans now, so, you know, and soybeans are a popular vegetarian food, you know, and things like tofu, so there's a slight...
soya oil is very popular also now, so you see that advertised a lot.
Yeah, so vegetarians, be careful where you get your soya from. And in Colombia, an area 2,000 to 3,000 square kilometres a year is cut down for logging and agriculture and mining, and already 30% of the forest has been cut down in Colombia.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so what is the greenhouse effect?
Well, sunlight comes into the atmosphere, but because of the carbon dioxide, it cannot readily escape, so the heat is trapped beneath this layer of carbon dioxide, which causes the temperature of the Earth and the sea and the atmosphere to increase.
Yeah, the radiation just bounces around, trapped in the lower atmosphere, and as you said, everything gets warmer. And they've studied ice core data, which they take these they drill these deep holes in the Arctic ice, and they remove a great big long bit of ice, and they study it, and they say now that the levels of CO2 presently are higher than they've ever been in history, and it goes back hundreds of thousands of years, I think, the ice core data.
So even in terms of massive volcanic eruptions, meteors that maybe killed the dinosaurs, none of that has produced information that's anywhere near what we've got at the moment.
No. So what do you think are some of the worst emitters of greenhouse gases in the world? Which countries?
The biggest industrial country has to be, I guess, the US, and the biggest industrializing country is China, so I'd have to say those two.
Yeah, you're right. China is number 1 with 22% of all the greenhouse gases emitted. The USA 20%. India is 3rd with 5.5%. The UK 8th with 1.8%. Mexico 11th with 1.2%, and Spain 19th with about 1%. And actually the top 10 emitters of greenhouse gases emit 67% of all the greenhouse gases, so there's a few countries causing all the problems.
Yeah, well, the States and the two massive developing economies like India and China, basically those three are responsible for 50%.
Yeah. And the Kyoto Protocol was introduced a few years ago to try and combat this and to try and put something into international law. And 187 states had signed this by 2009 and ratified it, which means made it officially law, except for one major country that didn't ratify it. Who was that?
Well, I would have to say again the major non-ratifier of acts and UN resolutions. The United States?
Yeah. And in Europe, well, Europe signed it as a whole, the European Community, so they sort of counted as one state signing it. And interestingly, Germany and the UK are the only members of the European Union that are on track to achieve the objectives set out in the Kyoto Protocol.
Oh, I thought Spain would be up there as well, because they're doing lots of wind farms, lots of solar power.
And the Scandinavian countries that are always very progressive with these kind of initiatives, but no, Germany and the UK. What about renewable energy? 19% of global energy comes from renewable energy now, about 19 or 20%. What kind of natural resources do we use, and what kind of renewable energy types are there?
Well, solar power. Living in Spain with lots of sun, there are lots of houses now that have solar panels on the roof, which they use to provide like heating in winter and hot water. So that's quite popular. And also when I was on holiday in Madeira, almost every building had solar panels on the roof. So they're very ecologically minded. It's windy now, so obviously it makes me think about wind power.
Yeah.
Those huge wind farms with the enormous windmills that used to generate electricity. And we're on the beach by the sea, so you can use the sea. Harness wave power, again, for
tidal energy as well, it's known as. And also geothermal heat. They drill great big boreholes down into the Earth's, well, not into the core, but where it's warmer, and they get this superheated water out that then they use for energy. They use the heat from the water. And in Brazil, they use ethanol fuel for 18% of the cars now, which is made from sugarcane. So they're powering, you know, a fifth of the country's cars from sugarcane, ethanol.
That's a good initiative, because obviously that's a fifth of many cars that are not burning petrol.
Yeah, in Denmark, Denmark's a leader in sort of wind energy, and 20% of their power comes from wind energy. And in Spain, 11%. But last year there was one day, there was a great big storm that came over, and for 1 day or 2 days, Spain received 51% of its energy from wind power because of the storm. So it was the first country in the world that ever went over 50%.
Really?
From alternative energy. And what other forms are there? Carbon capture and storage is a form of renewable energy where they take the CO2 emitted from factories and they basically recycle it. And methane capture. Can you tell us a little bit about methane capture in livestock?
Well, methane in livestock is actually a large pollutant, and in places like the UK with large farms and lots of agriculture, obviously the effect is quite noticeable. And some researchers at, I think it was the University of Newcastle, so in the north of England, I read this in a BBC article, but basically they were trying to reduce the methane output of sheep by altering their diets, and they worked out that if sheep were fed curry, it would reduce their methane output by 40%.
That's ridiculous. What kind of curry?
I doubt it was mutton curry, because then you'd have mad sheep disease.
No. Well, I can't believe anyone's feeding curry to sheep, but anyway, if it reduces their fart gases by 40%, then that's fantastic for the world, isn't it? So, alternative movements, what are these all about? Well, about sustainability, which in a nutshell is the capacity to endure. What does that mean?
I don't really know. In that, I guess it means that sustainability, you're being responsible, managing...
Sustainable management of resources, basically. So, to do things in such a way that the natural environment is protected for the future and is able to endure, and we don't damage the world. And sustainable living movements have become quite popular. You see more and more about this in the media and on websites, and certainly in Thailand I got to know a couple of people involved in this kind of thing. And sustainable living is about leading a lifestyle that attempts to reduce an individual or society's use of the Earth's natural resources and one's own resources in order to live in such a way that these things can endure again. And what about carbon footprints? This is a very popular word in England at the moment. Everyone has their carbon footprint. Can you explain what that is?
Well, just the way that when you walk across the sand on the beach, you leave a footprint. With carbon, it's a way of measuring the amount of carbon outputted by a particular person through their activities, their lifestyle, what they do, what they don't do, what they manage, what they don't manage.
How they travel, particularly.
Yeah, so if you travel a lot in a large vehicle with a big engine that pumps out lots of exhaust fumes, your footprint is bigger than someone who takes a bicycle to work.
Yeah, interestingly, in the UK now, they charge much lower car taxes now for cars that are more economical. So a lot of the, like, my mother drives a Volkswagen Polo, and it's got very low tax of £100 or £200 a year compared to, you know, a big BMW or something like that, because it's so economical. It's a diesel, and it's got what do they call them, catalyzers or something, I can't remember. But basically the point is the governments are introducing these initiatives for travel, so that you can then buy, when you buy a new car, you can check out how ecologically sound it is before you drive it, and therefore you will pay lower taxes for it as well. There's a lot of governmental incentives.
That's a good idea, because if you want to buy a new car and you know that it's going to be economical for you in terms of the amount of fuel you need to buy, it's ecologically beneficial. That's two factors, and the government initiative means that you pay less for it. It's cheaper all round, so the government incentive is really appealing for people, I'd imagine, unless you're interested in a car as a status symbol.
And would you say you are a member of the green movement in your attitudes? Do you recycle and things like that?
Yes, every day. One of my little jobs in the house, whenever I leave to go to work in the morning, all the recyclable rubbish, I have to take it downstairs and put it into the various coloured bins in the street, which I never used to do when I was in the UK, because you'd normally have to walk 20 minutes, half an hour, if you were lucky, to find one. But here in Barcelona there's recycling points more or less on every street corner, so it's not a problem. They make it convenient to do, and people here do it as second nature.
And what else can individuals do to help improve things, apart from recycling?
Well, in terms of energy, there's these very energy efficient light bulbs and electrical appliances you can get now. Just simple things like making sure you turn off the lights and turn off the television when you go out. It's not so common in Spain, but in England many people have a bath, but having a shower instead of a bath it uses far less water and far less hot water also, so you don't have to heat the water with energy, and you're using considerably less.
And in terms of travelling, what can we do? I mean, obviously we can get the train or the bus where we can, instead of driving a car, or walk. We can share travel, you know, so if you're doing a route to work, you know, you get 2 or 3 people in a car instead of driving yourself.
Oh yeah, these car share schemes have become quite popular.
Yeah. And I've written down here, don't be lazy, fly less. But when you fly, flying is one of the worst pollutants, isn't it? Worst forms of pollution. And actually, when you buy aircraft tickets in the UK now online, you can offset your carbon footprint. They give you an option. Normally, you know, it's like hire a car, buy insurance, you know, pay for extra baggage. Now you can offset your carbon footprint, which means you add about €5 or something to the cost of the flight. And I think the airline then puts that towards planting some trees somewhere, which is quite a good idea, I think.
Well, that's the theory, but if these low-cost airlines and their money-grabbing tendencies are anything to go by, I'd need a bit of proof to see the trees before I opted for that click button.
I agree with you. Don't fly EasyJet, anyone.
Or Ryanair.
Okay. So what are the predictions? What are predictions for the future? Will sustainable development become a way of life for everyone?
Well, it has to be, really. I mean, we're realising it now, and really governments and individuals need to do a lot more to say, okay, this is what's happening, this is what we need to do to combat things that are happening that are negative, and to try and rectify some of the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, and I agree with what the tree huggers originally said, the Indian women tree huggers, that ecology is permanent economy, And this whole idea that making people think that if they protect their environment, that down the line it will have economical benefits for them as well. So i.e. that economy isn't just about what money you're going to get in a month or 2 months, it's about looking forward and having a vision for the future as well.
Which is very good, but most big business now, they just put short-term profits over long-term sustainability, which is why some of these industrializing countries haven't signed up to the protocol. They don't look that far in the future, so I think the tree huggers are onto something, but it'll take a while to catch on.
And personally, I'm a bit of a fan of the Gaia hypothesis. Do you know anything about that?
You told me a little bit about it before we started recording, but I can't remember. It's a book written by an ex-NASA
scientist, Joe, in the late 70s, and it was called Gaia, a new look at life on Earth. And it basically proposed the view that Earth was viewed as a single living organism rather than a collection of lots and lots of organisms. And I think it's quite a valuable way of seeing things, that, you know, you see the linked nature of life on Earth and the fact that one thing affects another thing, and you know, it explains ecosystems and ecology very well as well, that we can't think of things individually, you know, that killing off one animal's just the end of one animal and there's thousands of species on Earth, so that's okay. You know, it's the fact that damage in one place will damage something else. It's like a living body, a living organism.
Yeah, because everything's linked. I mean, if you get rid of one animal in the food chain, the chain breaks. So if you extrapolate that out across ecosystems, it makes sense.
Great, thanks for listening. Don't be lazy, get on your bicycle.
Yeah, I'm off to go and hug a tree, so see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hola, me llamo Rose, y en la clase de hoy vamos a hacer algo un poco diferente. El inglés es un idioma muy descriptivo, y aprender los colores es algo a lo que a veces no se da importancia en las clases de inglés. En inglés se usan los colores todo el tiempo en el lenguaje de cada día, y hoy te vamos a enseñar algunos colores nuevos, de uso menos habitual, que seguro que no has aprendido antes. También te enseñaremos cómo usarlos para describir tu entorno de una manera muy creativa. Primero oirás una lista de 7 colores en español, seguida de su traducción en inglés. Repite el color en inglés en las pausas para practicar tu pronunciación. Luego vas a oír estos colores usados en contexto en un diálogo corto. Turquesa.
Turquoise. Turquoise.
Marfil.
Ivory. Ivory.
Verde esmeralda.
Emerald green. Emerald green.
Carmesí.
Crimson. Crimson.
Violeta.
Violet. Violet.
Magenta.
Magenta. Magenta.
Azul oscuro casi negro.
Midnight blue. Midnight blue. I love going to the islands in Thailand. The turquoise sea and ivory beaches are so beautiful, I could live there forever.
What are the sunsets like? I imagine they're amazing against the emerald green sea.
My God, yes. In the evening, the sky becomes an incredible crimson and violet, before changing into a deep magenta and finally midnight blue.
Los siguientes colores se llaman autumnal colors, en inglés, colores otoñales. Bronce.
Bronze. Bronze.
Naranja quemado.
Burnt orange. Burnt orange.
Cobre.
Copper. Copper.
Marrón dorado.
Golden brown. Golden brown.
El color marrón del óxido.
Rust. Rust. What I miss about autumns in England are the incredible golden brown colours you see everywhere.
I thought England was always dark and grey.
No, At the beginning of autumn, the trees become a burnt orange colour. They then change to copper and later a beautiful bronze before finally taking on a deep rust colour.
Por último, aquí tienes algunos colores que se usan de manera más común en inglés para describir la ropa. Beige.
Beige. Beige.
Color chicle rosa claro.
Bubblegum pink. Bubblegum pink.
Khaki.
Khaki. Khaki.
Verde lima.
Lime green. Lime green.
Azul marino.
Navy blue. Navy blue.
Verde oliva.
Olive green. Olive green.
Do you like girls wearing bubblegum pink skirts, Tom?
Haha, not really. It's especially horrible when mixed with a lime green t-shirt.
What colours do you like wearing?
Well, when I was young, like all English people, I liked boring navy blue. Now I often wear khaki, beige and olive green clothes.
¿Ya está? Gracias por escuchar nuestra clase de lenguaje sobre colores inusuales. Hasta la próxima. Chao.
Gracias por acompañarnos con este podcast de Ingles.fm. Recuerda que el webdoc contiene una transcripción completa de la conversación, listas de vocabulario, notas culturales y la clase. Lo puedes descargar de forma instantánea desde Ingles.fm. Nos vemos.